Welcome to our playground.
Recess the podcast is an eclectic show of organic discussion, imagination, deep conversations, interviews, creativity, intuition, high vibrations, and fun.
Be informed, energized, inspired, and entertained with me, Jamie.
And me, Brian. Ready or not, here we come.
Because we all need to take a break. Hey, Brian, how's it going?
I'm good, Jamie. How are you?
I'm very well. I'm happy to be playing here at Recess with you.
I am too, and we have a wonderful guest tonight.
Yes.
He's a friend of mine who I met through, we're both members, I guess, what would we call that, a speakers bureau?
Yes, absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we kind of became friends through that, and we've had some nice chats, and he's just a really, really kind person who's doing a lot of good things in the world. Bruce Pulver, welcome.
Thank you. It's great to be here. Hey, Jamie, good to meet
Hey,
you.
Bruce.
Good to meet you.
You as well.
Yeah.
Thanks for being here.
Awesome. Bruce is an author, an entrepreneur. He is a professional speaker. He's an encourager, and he's a believer in word power. And so I figured we would, it's not cliche because, you hear a lot of people talking about, but it is so important, the power of our words. And Bruce has figured out a really clever way to share that message with people. Would you say that you have? I totally think you have.
Well, if you took it on a timeline, it'd go from, what the heck's going on in your head to, maybe start writing this stuff down to, sharing kind of what you're thinking about. And then the real sort of affirmation of that, Ryan, has been, feedback, right? Where you've shared a word with someone, the way you look at it, how you kind of the perspective you give it, and then someone says to you, wow, I'd not thought of it that way, and it made an impact on my day, or it helped me think about things a little bit differently. So the affirmation comes in of figuring this out really is, I think, about impact.
So to paint a little better picture so our audience kind of understands what we're talking about, you take a word like strong, for instance, and you break it down, and it almost, like you said, it becomes an affirmation. And it's a whole nother way to look at that particular word and maybe gain strength from it. And am I right? Correct?
Yeah. So I guess the correct poetic version of this is an acrostic poem or an acrostic message. And, they've been around forever. You'll see teachers will use them for, what the 5 steps of the objective of the lesson is, or CEOs or leaders will say, this is our vision, and they'll break it down that way. I took a little bit of a different slant with it as I kind of was impacted by a life change, and these words just started coming to me. It was, how can I take that one word and unpack it, or have it blossom in a way where it gives me meaning and encouragement. So that's really what kind of poured into me, and sort of the gift that I was given to look at words that way.
Did you do it for yourself initially?
Yeah. So the way it started was through a major corporate downsizing that I was sort of, whisked away in, if you will. A lot of us could say it happened to me, but ultimately it happened for me. And I woke up the day after this layoff, after a career of 25 plus years in the industry I was in. And that's the first word that I wrote, which you talked about, which was the word strong. I looked at it, and immediately in my mind became the letters of the word were stand tall, remain optimistic, now go for it. So it was a way for me to take that word and say, okay, what do I need to do with it? How can I implement that word in my life, rather than just bouncing around saying, Bruce, you got to be strong today? No, you got to stand tall, you got to remain optimistic, and you got to go for it. So that's how it all started.
I love that. One of the things that I do, Bruce, is, and the audience who's listening, I pick a word. Instead of doing New Year's resolutions, I'll pick a word for the year, the one that I want to embody. And very often I have to experience both the light and the shadow side of it in order to integrate it, in order to really have it become part of me. But I love what you're doing with it. I may try that next time.
Oh, I love that. A lot of folks will pick a word for their year. And I think that's so powerful because, it allows you to focus And, one year I had the word abundance was my word. So versus scarcity, right? How you look at things, just how you see the world, not accumulation, but, the world is abundant or it's scarce. And so I just wrote it vertically, and I couldn't tell you right now how I described abundance. There's too many letters in it. But, and it doesn't necessarily just have to be a single word. You can write a phrase around each letter. So yeah, I love that. And the thing about, to me, and we'll get kind of deeper into my head about this, is the word resolutions. I really don't like it. I'd rather drop after the R and the E, drop an A and an L and then a space, where resolutions become real solutions, and boom, then we can activate it. Then we can put it in place and make it really happen.
Love that. Yeah.
Yeah, I've always kind of been iffy on resolutions too, because I don't know, there's not, for me personally, I don't know, I'm very self-motivated, luckily, and I don't necessarily need to trick myself into doing something, or you know what I mean. I guess that's maybe the wrong way of saying it. I think a lot of people do find success with resolutions because at least maybe it gets them started, and if you can start and keep it going long enough, and then it's going to stick.
100%.
But a lot of times they don't stick, and then people beat themselves up.
Right. Then it becomes almost anti-incentive. It's like, oh my gosh, that whatever, pick the exercise device of the year. It
Going to the gym. Yeah.
becomes a clothes hanger, or, it becomes a clothesline. And, that's me. February 15th, all of a sudden that treadmill becomes where the clothes go when they come out of the washing machine. And that's just me. I'm not picking on anybody, so no hate mail, please. But just sort of the way my mind is wired.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One of the other things that I love about your work is that our words create our world. And what you're describing of how you embody that, you take on the positive, more encouraging side of it. How do we see the world? How do we see ourselves? How do we want to approach life? Life is going to throw things at us, and our words will create the world in which we choose to experience.
Oh my gosh. And I mean, you saying seeing both sides of the word as part of your picking the word for the year, I think is so powerful. And here's a simple example that I think of, and I use often when we speak. The word stuck, right, could be like in the mud, or I visualize concrete forming around my legs, right, and I can't move. I'm stuck, or I stuck with it. Two different things, same word.
Yeah, that's powerful. We need more like you in this world.
Well, I will tell you this. I say this a lot. I am a mouse in my own laboratory. And Brian and I talked about this. It's like, I haven't figured this out. It's not a light switch. It's something that kind of fuels me, Jamie, every day. I have to have some sort of word to lean on, or some sort of motivation that kind of helps me. And for me, it's work. Some people it's painting. Some people it's music. Some people it's the, endorphins of a run. But I think it's really important to find kind of what that is. And that's how we can move forward in that way.
Yeah. Well, they say that mantra or affirmations, it actually means protector of the mind. And so when we have something like this to fall back on, whenever you go about your day and something comes up that you didn't plan for, that wasn't going your way, it's like, wait a minute, let me come back to this. So it protects the mind from going down the rabbit trails it shouldn't go.
Oh, sure.
Yeah. Well, after you first did that first word for yourself during your transition period at work, did you start just kind of doing it more frequently, or was it as kind of a slow burn, or when did it really kind of start kicking in for you?
Great question, right? Something happens once, it's an oh my goodness. Something happens twice, it might be a coincidence. Sometimes something happens 3 times, it's a pattern. So 420 plus consecutive mornings, I woke up, and pretty much at the same time, I was, divinely, my Christian faith says God was out there for me, helping me, guiding me. It just became an expectant morning situation. And, it was kind of a journal. That's really all it was. And kind of came downstairs in the morning, and my daughters would say, okay, Dad, what's the word today? As teenagers can do as their eyes roll, But I tell you where it really became affirming to me, was when I started a small text group and sending out the word. So I had a close group of friends, and I had a physician friend of mine who's a pediatric surgeon. And so he operates on 7 day old babies to, young kids to, but pediatric surgery. Messaged me one day and said, I needed that word today, Bruce. And I was like, okay. So we had to have a call. So I called him. I said, talk to me about it. He said, we were in the pre-op scrubbing area prior to going into OR. We were going to operate on a baby that was 7 days old and the heart was the size of a walnut. He said we had 6 people in the sinks working, talking, and it was kind of tense because there were 10 possible things that could be what they had to deal with when they opened up the heart. And then in that, there were 10 possible solutions for each one of them. So just imagine the surgeons getting ready to go in and do that. And he said, you texted me, my assistant pulled out my phone out of my lab scrub coat. And he said, what is it? And she said, it's a text from Bruce. He said, read it. And it was the word calm. And I wrote calm, catch a little moment. And he told me that evening that helped them step away from the 100 possible combinations. Now, it wasn't the reason the surgery went well. It wasn't all of that, but it just said, wow, this is making an impact more than just on me.
That's awesome.
That's powerful for sure.
Yeah. Felt really good to sort of go, okay, this is more than just this crazy exercise going on in my head, but it started meaning things to other people. So it kind of became the ripple, Jamie, if you know what I mean, where I didn't know who it was going to impact, except that kept me going. It kept me pedaling, if you will, on just searching for something else to write, something else to share.
I mean, there's so many things you're doing at the same time there. Number one, it's kind of a form of meditation. It's a form of connection with your higher source. It's you're constantly reminding yourself to be kind of in a positive space of mind, you know what I mean, with the words that you're producing and expanding on.
Yeah.
And you're touching others, your family, your friends, and you put a book out too.
Yeah, it's also, I think this, that after that book and some talking and speaking, I had the opportunity to do a TED talk, and that was a whole other thing. But the reason I bring that up is, you get comments on your TED, right? Whether it's a YouTube comment or someone sends you something. And what I try to really be aware of here is someone commented and said, what's up with all this toxic positivity? And I took that comment to heart because I never wanted it to sound like, read this word and you're awesome, right? It's a struggle, whether it's, like I said, the two opposite words of stuck or the word I'm bound. Yeah, that could mean I really feel like I'm constricted. And that's a feeling that's legitimate. That's not something you just erase, or it's not like the beach ball that has air in it that you're trying to suppress under the water. Those are real things we have to deal with. But if we can look at bound and say, not constricted, but I'm bound and determined, it just changes the perspective of what's going on, that script that's going on in our mind. And I think that's incredibly powerful. Not just the outward. The outward we can look amazing and feel amazing. That's why Instagram's so successful, right? And all the social media platforms. But it's what's really wired inside. What's that movie that's playing in our head that I think is what I'm doing tries to help us put a little bit of focus on, that says, hey, sometimes it's okay to be okay not being okay. However, can we stay there? And that's where I'm trying to say, no, let's reach out for our potential. Let's try to get a little bit better each day.
That's brilliant, because I was just going to ask you if you've ever run into this over positivity thing, because very often people will say, well, you're just ignoring the reality that life is hard. And so I appreciate you speaking to that, because I have a tendency, I've been called the Pollyanna syndrome, where I take something and turn it into something positive. And there's been moments in my past where it can be dismissive of what that person is going through. But like you, I'm determined to try and change perspective, because I believe that our perspective, reality is what we think it is. So changing that perspective so that our reality can shift.
Yeah, just to maybe a follow-up comment on that is the first public talk I was asked to give about this was at an organization here in Atlanta, which is where I'm based, that's a chemical and alcohol dependency inpatient hospital for adolescents.
Mm-hmm.
I was invited to come and speak to the parents of patients in this program. And I said yes. And then I thought about it and I said, wow, I just lost a job. I didn't have, Johnny or Sally, who everything was great in high school. Boom, they're off to college or they're on the next step of their life. All of a sudden, mom and dad get a phone call that says something devastating, right? This person is either overdosed or, they found them in maybe a suicidal situation, and boom, all of a sudden their life has changed. And I went up to the director of this hospital program and I said, are you sure that you want me to step in here? I said, I just lost a job. I can't relate, right? That mine was not as big or as devastating. And she looked at me, she was professional in social work and assistance. And she said, everybody's going through something. Your moment, just refer to it as a BAM moment, because that's exactly what those parents had and exactly what you had in your job loss. So the need to relate without understating that we're all going through something is like the center aspect of what I do when I try to do a talk. And it doesn't necessarily have to be on the downside of something. It could be a merger of two companies and a CEO brings me in and says, I want to talk about where we're going to go with culture and how awesome that opportunity is. We still want to break down culture as a word, maybe, and recognize that each party in these two different companies has some anxiety, has some stress, has some unknown, right? And that really helped me. So I appreciate you saying that, because it is something that, man, the last thing I want to do is walk into an event or a speaking engagement or a podcast and go, how amazing everything is, just get over it. No, that is not it. Life sucks sometimes, right? It really does.
Yeah. Wow. For the talks that you set up or that you're brought on for, obviously you kind of read the room, you figure out, who you're going to be speaking to. Do you then maybe I don't know how many words you've created up to now, but I mean, you probably create some specifically for them, and maybe pull some out of your bag of tricks as well that you've already created.
Yeah, I really try to get a perspective of what the meeting's about, right? It's celebration, if it's a sales kickoff, if it's I do some talks at some not-for-profit shelters and homeless situations, and even some trafficking and exploited recovery programs. So each setting, it's really important from my perspective to kind of pay attention to what's going on. And yeah, I don't think there's any kind of canned talk. I mean, I've got some go-tos and some things that have impacted me, because I think it's important for me to share my story. But one of the exercises that's really important in my talks, and I call it a word shop versus a workshop, is that the participants get the opportunity to write their own word during the talk. Like, there's a lot of different ways to go with that. And it is just amazing to see folks step in, get a little bit uncomfortable, pick their word for the year, right? And then write it vertically and kind of go through the same process. And the real magic happens when folks are willing to share what they wrote. Because that just totally reverses the entire session, and it becomes about, the folks in the audience, so that, I can try to be a Sherpa, a guide in the process, and not tell the story about my mountain climb, but make it more about helping others through something they may be facing.
Yeah. Okay, awesome. I'm sure you've been asked this question 100 times, and it may change over the years, but what would be your favorite word right now?
Yeah, wow. Well, there's several. So if I give you a couple, one of my probably all-time favorite words, because it just oozes my desire for encouragement and responsibility, is that we all have gifts. So it's GIFTS. And I define that as God installed features to share. So there's a challenge there. They're already in us. Some assembly is required. We got to go out and build them and develop them. And Jamie, yours are so different than mine. And that's what we should celebrate, right? Not the comparison. So gifts is one, and we share them. It's our responsibility to give them away because, my dad used to tell me, Bruce, the only time get should come before give is in the dictionary. So find a way to give. So the gifts, right? That would be number one. Number two, and I don't really have an acrostic for this, is the word action. Because I think we can sit here on a podcast and we can have a great thing. We can high five each other when it's over, but what are we going to activate? What are we going to do? Right. And so one of my favorite words is action, because it defines itself. The fourth letter is I, right? What are the first three letters of the word action?
ACT.
Act, right?
Act.
The last two are on. So I have to take action if I want a change. If I want to go from one situation to another, I act on. And probably the last one is the word commit, because I think anything to get started, we have to commit, whether it's a resolution, a real solution, whatever we're talking about. And commit is simply count on me making it there. I can say that to you, Jamie, or to you, Brian. I commit, I'm in. What that means is you can count on me to be there with you. So those are probably some of the ones that resonate with me right now.
That's fabulous. Any of them scare you? Challenge you?
Most all of them at some point do, because sometimes when I write them, it's about what I'm aspiring to be or what the change I'm looking for. So I wrote fear a couple of times. So you asked me, are there anything I'm afraid of? And I wrote it two ways. I can look at fear and go, oh my gosh, with fear, I fail every attempt regardless. So boom, that's just right down the wrong hole, right? Or I can look at fear and say it fuels energy and resilience. It doesn't mean it's not a challenging situation. It doesn't mean the situation isn't what I'd want, but it's just a couple of ways to look at it. So yeah, some of the words, another phrase I've written that is, in order to live without tension, because life, it can be tense. In order to live without tension, let's try to live with intention, right? So kind of focus. It's just, again, you're getting a little snippet of what goes on in this crazy brain, but that's just sort of, it was the geeky thing, right? When I grew up, it's like, how come you look at words this way? I never wrote them that way until the job situation, but it's become my God installed feature to share.
Yeah. So your book, Above the Chatter, Our Words Matter, Powerful Words That Changed My World Forever. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, and again, it kind of there wasn't really a book intended when it started. So I'd love to say, yeah, I had this master plan and I was going to then go out and, change the universe by this book. It was a journal. And so on that journal, process became a journey, right? And I love that word because the first two letters are J-O and the last letter is Y. So we got to find joy in the journey. And it was sort of this getting uncomfortable process. I didn't know about any way of publishing, self-publishing, or finding a publisher, or hybrid publishing, so we just I reached out to the person that started this speakers bureau that we're in, because I found her, Tammy Kling is her name, and I found Tammy on a TED Talk, and it was words are currency. And I went, oh man, she is speaking my language. What does this mean? And I dug in a little bit differently, a little bit deeper, and I sent her a chapter. And when I say a chapter, I took all these words and I kind of said, okay, how do they align, right? One of them was like on when the batteries are low. Another was like, determination, name it and claim it. Another was on leadership. I did days of the week and months of the year, and sent her a couple of chapters, and we established a relationship right after that we wanted to work together. So I learned a lot during that process of going from, a 3-ring binder to, you can see it up here behind me, a actual book. And man, I learned so much about that. I learned about, that what I was doing was making a difference. I realized it was going to take a lot of effort to really get to that goal line of actually having a published book. And it's really felt good. Part of that process, though, also became, again, back to gifts, right? That I felt I felt the calling that said, when you sell a book or a book to do an engagement, or someone buys a box of books, I kind of wanted to be the Tom Shoes of books, right? I found, because I was in the healthcare technology business for my entire career, it's like I'm in hospitals all the time. Hospitals have libraries. Families read books in libraries when they're going through stuff. So I just, after I met with the executive at a hospital, I said, can you introduce me to the person that runs your family resource center? And I would just take a couple books down, and I kind of just said, I'd like to donate these to you. If you would read them, and if you think they'll make a difference in your hospital reading room, please put them in there. And that's really also fueled the journey.
That's so beautiful. Inspirational. Thank you.
It's like I said, it goes back to gift, my favorite word. It's man, it's not, if I were to, once you get validation that something, or affirmation that what you're doing is kind of helping, even if it's one person in a 2,000 person talk that comes up to you and says something, you just know you're on. It's almost like you got to stay on that path.
Yeah. I love that you said that, because very often my clients will come and say, I want to change the world. I'm like, start with one person.
You start with yourself.
Yeah. Well, of course, start with yourself, but if you
yes,
make a difference in one person's life, it's that ripple effect. You may never know what the outcome is, but change the life of one person.
Yeah. That is absolutely the coolest thing. If you want to talk about, the personal, private, in the room, high-fiving yourself about this, is when you get a note from someone you don't know that you don't know that you don't know. and it's just, maybe you'll meet them, maybe you won't, but when someone takes a moment and just sends you a note, or calls you, or thanks you, or gives you a review, or not, and again, it's not for the reasons that is accolades personally. It's like, man, that made an impact, and that feels really good.
Yeah. Awesome.
Yeah.
We're running toward the end of our talk. Before we go, I have to ask you, you have a very interesting side gig, your love of jazz and music, and I believe you're a musician as well. Tell us some of the things that you're doing related to that.
Well, yeah. So one of the things that my wife and I love to do, and we don't have one on the calendar now, and it's been a little while, is I love seeing music live. And I love seeing music live in small rooms. It's just, to me, it's always been, well, jazz gigs don't always have the 30,000 person stadiums, right, that they fill up. So I'm kind of used to being in a small, kind of a club scene or sort of thing. And I'm a drummer. I grew up playing the drums, although it's now more of a avocation. I just love hearing great players. I love, going out and seeing a session where, it's called a jam session, where musicians will come and they'll just play a tune together, and as they call the tune, the next thing you know, they're just lathering up in a groove, and you go, man, that's so creative. So the problem with that, though, is you have to go out to see it, and then you got to come home. And so my wife is a chef, and we know several musicians, and we came up with this idea for us several years ago. It wasn't an original idea, to put on concerts in our house, which meant we didn't have to leave. Do it right there. We hire the musicians to come in, we ticket the event, and then it's a meet and greet where the musicians meet the guests meet the musicians. We eat together. And so it's not like this green room, all of a sudden someone's on stage, there's lights, nobody sees anybody. And so that's one of the things that we love to do the most, is to share a type of music that we enjoy with our personal and professional and kind of community friends. And so that's probably the coolest thing for me, is to still stay connected with music by, supporting the creative artists that make that music.
That's awesome. You write reviews, correct? Or you did?
Yeah, that's what kind of got me started, I think, or at least maybe set the spark to the newspaper, or the kindling, was I started writing for a couple of online publications and some jazz publications. And my goal was to find emerging artists that needed something about what they're doing that they could, use for their social media. And man, I just got boxes of CDs. At the time, it would be CDs. Now it would be streaming. Sorry about that, but now it would be streaming, right? And I'd listen, and I'd only pick recordings that I could lift up. I didn't want to write anything that was, I didn't want to be a food critic that slammed a restaurant. I didn't want to be a music critic so because of that, it was kind of the energy of, man, I really like this vibe, or I really like the whatever it is, and that has helped us establish relationships with artists. And then you now have a personal relationship, and now you say, hey, we're putting on this house concert. Would you come in from Dallas, or what would it cost or take for you to come down from New York and do this? So yeah, I did some reviews for a while, and that was really fun because it allowed me to take some, creative license in writing and how I describe the music.
Fantastic. Jamie, anything else?
I'm just so grateful to have met you and to have this conversation. I would love for you to come back another time and us to continue. And I can't wait to get a copy of your book. I've ordered it before the podcast, so looking forward to it.
Well, fantastic. Well, listen, guys, thanks for having me on. Just sharing a couple of ideas about, the power of a word, and they can change a life. They really can. So thanks for letting me kind of expose some of my thoughts about that. It's been great to be with you guys.
Oh, anytime, Bruce. I appreciate you.
Fantastic.
All right. Thanks, everybody. Have a great day.
Bye.
Thanks for joining Jamie and Brian on Recess, the podcast, the twice-weekly show of eclectic, inspired, and entertaining discussion. Be sure to subscribe as well as share with your friends and spread the good news. It's always appreciated. If you'd like to learn more about Jamie's intuitive coaching services and creative projects, please go to jamiedon.com. And if you'd like to learn more about Brian and his creative spark world and books, please go to gbrianbenson.com.